Okay. Good morning. We're on Hamshech Ayin Beis, on page 1152. Aleph Kufnun Beis, in volume 2. And, okay. So we're talking now about the relationship between the Yesh and the Ayin, meaning the Yesh HaNivra, the created Yesh, from the Ayin, that is the creative energy, the divine creative energy that manifests within the Yesh. As we said, it has a paradox. On one hand, it's removed because it's a creative force that's outside and beyond the creation. Ein Arech. On the other hand, the power is removed, but the process is that the energy actually enters into the creation, each creature. However, it's in a state of concealment. So it's a slapshus, but behelam, mechusa, concealed. Unlike ilav olul, in cause and effect, the cause is mislabish in the effect, like seichel into midas, but there it's revealed. It's in a revealed state. The midah senses it and experiences it. It's murgish, it's musig and murgish. Whereas the yesh does not have a musig and murgish in the ayin. And he also mentioned that's why Bria, in the world of Bria, where the Metzias is just beginning to emerge of Sharis HaMetzias, and it's still Bikiruv, it's still in a closer state to the Ayin, you can't call it a Yesh Mamish, he says. Of Sharis HaMetzias. Okay. Then came the parentheses, which we learned, and that's where we stopped, I believe. Yeah. The parentheses is about Rosh Hashanah, but also about the Avodah now. So what we stated till now is the way it is when God created existence. Yesh ma'ayin. So really, if you really want to spell it out, it would be the Yesh Amiti is the source of all creation, obviously. And he's the only one that can create a Yesh that in la'il v'siba cheres, that doesn't sense any source. So the Yesh Amiti is the creator. He creates first by creating by manifesting in the ayin. In the ayin, the higher level of ayin is ayin hamiti. That's etzem ha'oyer, or depending on which interpretation, but basically it's an oyer that reflects the source. Then that ayin goes into a second stage, and it becomes an ayin of the yesh hanivra. That's the divine energy that will manifest within and relate to and manifest within creation. And then there's the yesh hanivra, is a final product. So there you have yesh, ayin, yesh. Now, that's the way it is by Bereshit, but that's the way God created existence. However, there's a thing called Avodah. There's a purpose for all this. The God didn't create it, should remain that way. He wants now, and that's the whole purpose, not just tachtenim, a yesh. He wants there should be a dira b'tachtein. So to do that, the yesh, meaning the neshama as it's inside of a guf, the yesh, guf, gashmi, and chumri, and a physical world should begin to recognize and become aware of Elikus, beginning, of course, with Elikus that's within it, the ayin in the Yesh HaNivra, and then climb the ladder and those stepping stones as to reach the highest and highest levels, which we're not going to go into all the levels now. So we're focusing right now how the Yesh is created by the ayin, but on the other hand, the Yesh now wants to have a relationship with the ayin, wants to. That's the Avodah. Now, if you want to frame it in context of existence as we see it, most of the world is busy with its own yesh and is either not aware of the ayin or is not interested, or even if it's aware, it's minimal. The kavanah of Habriya from the beginning of creation, 5,780 years ago, coming on to 5,781, was in order to transform the yesh into a dira b'tachtenim, a yesh that would be aware of godliness, and not just aware, but slowly assimilate and internalize and be transformed. Be transformed. And when we say Mashiach will come, and the Geula Amitis Vashlema, what will ultimately be that there'll be a dira b'tachtenim. It doesn't say dira. In tachtenim, there'll be tachtenim, there'll be a yesh, gashmi, physical entity. And in that we will recognize through our Avodah, not automatically. In Atzilus was initially created as Elikus. Atzilus doesn't need Aveda. Same thing even on higher levels. I mean, there's Aveda to some extent, but not to the real purpose. Here, it's not Atzilus. Like he says in Tanya, Perek Lamed Vav, Elimus Alyenim would not be the purpose, because Hey Alehem Yiridim Er Panav Baruch. They're all Gili Elikus, so they're always lower than the higher Gili. It's only this world that's not a Gili at all. That's the purpose, but the purpose is to transform it. So every time you and I and every person on this earth somewhat does not give in to our temptations of the yesh and to the seductions and to all the distractions and align ourselves to doing something what God wants, we're beginning to slowly reverse the process. Now, we all learn Basar Legani, Tafshin Yud, Tafshin Yudal, the Rebbe's Basar Legani, explaining the Frierdiker Rebbe's Basar Legani. What's the first opening of the whole Maimon? That God created the world and it was Ika Shechina B'Tachtenim Heise, Basar Legani. Right? It says there that Basar Legani, Leglani Ksuv Legnuni. Doesn't say Legani Legnuni. Meaning, this was his canopy. This was where God's presence was. And then the Chet Tzadas began a process of concealment. So yes, there was a yesh. Adam and Chava were a yesh, but they were a refined yesh. Had they not eaten from Chet Tzadas, they had not eaten from the tree of knowledge, they would have brought the Gula. But they did. So the concealments began. One generation, another generation, more concealment, until Avram Avinu began to reverse the process. His chilahoy, remember we learned until Avram was like a fela. It was like a dark cloud. It began to radiate, illuminate. Then Yitzchak, all the way to Moshe, Der Ashvi, V'shachanti b'seicham, he brought the Shechina back to down below, like it was in Gan Eden Mikedem before the Chet. And then, of course, the Gemara says that through Chet Egel, the Poskim Zumosam, the toxins, the Zuma, the poison, the Tuma, the impurities of the Chet Tzadas were stopped by Matan Torah, but then the Chet Egel reintroduced it. So, but now Matan Torah made a major change. Now we can transform the world. What do we always hear? That before Matan Torah, you couldn't transform existence. You couldn't make the physical reality a chefza shel kedusha. You could only bring ruchnius into it, but you couldn't transform it. El yenim layardu lamata, tachtenim layalu lamayla. Except for the mitzvah of bris milah, where the Eibishter told Avram he could take the bris and turn that into a mitzvah. That's why the Rebbe always brings that Avram said to Elazar, his servant, Simno yadcha tachas yirechi. Place your hand below my rechi is what? My like ribs. So it's a not a tznius thing to do, because he tell him to take a vow. So the Rebbe brings from the Ragachover, from Sfarim, that was the only chefza shel kedusha that existed, was the bris. Everything else didn't have any kedusha. When you make a vow, you want to hold on to a chayfetz of kedusha. However, after Matan Torah, that all changed. Now came the power to actually transform the material world, the yesh, into adira b'tachtenim. And then began the long journey from Matan Torah till this day of Eden, and frankly also Goyim, the whole world, slowly, bringing more Torah mitzvahs, with all the challenges and all the halamas v'estadim and the gullus and all the challenges, all came to refine the world. Even sodas, Yisurim Amrakin, Yisurim, even afflictions come to purify, come to cleanse, come to transform. So ultimately, when the Rebbe says the world is ready for the Gula now, what is he saying? It's after thousands of years of birurim, of these clarifications and refinements and elevations and Mesiras Nefesh, everything that was done to say it was all a waste, God forbid. It all slowly built up enough divine energy in this world, and now it's ready to erupt. So the material world has been refined. When the Rebbe says the world is ready, look, open your eyes, what does he say? That the world that we see today, look at, first of all, the Jewish world, the ability to be completely free as a Jew, to serve any way you wish. The developments in politics, a free world, human rights, the developments in technology. All this, as the Rebbe explains, based on the Zohar and based on many Svarim, all are signs that the world has changed, fundamentally changed. I was just listening to Purim Mem Zayin again. The Rebbe says it as explicit as it can. He says the world has changed, the whole world, including the Goyish world, everything. Listen to the third Sikha in Tavshim Mem Zayin Purim. It's explicit. The world has changed, and that's why we're talking now about Sheva Mitzvah Neyach, things that couldn't be spoken about because it would have been a danger. The point is, the world has been transformed, and that's why it's not a miracle now. If the Gula had come 3,000 years ago, it would require a miracle, because the world wasn't refined. Torah Mitzvahs wasn't everywhere. It would have been in one location, in Eretz Yisrael or the Chatzi Kadra Elyon. So I don't want to elaborate on this, but this is very basic ABC, frankly, of the Rebbe's approach and Chassidus in general. If you need more on this, just go back to all my talks on Sheva Mitzvah Neach and how the world has changed. So what does this mean? That the Yesh HaGashmi, what we're learning about right here, has become Eis Ge'edelt. It's been tamed. It's been refined. You see things that are still a Yesh. We don't have the Gula yet. And it's also the last sputterings. Like the Rebbe says there in the next Sikh at Purim Mem Zayin, the fourth Sikh, about Yizbaru v'Yislabna Advarim, that now we have the clarity. But again, I don't want to talk about that as much as getting back to the point here. So the material world has become a more refined world. You see,
but the Shleimus now is going to reach more than Adam before Eitz Hadas, right?
First of all, let's reach till there, and then it will be even more. Yeah. So bottom line is exactly. The Rebbe brings from the Medrash, Eila Teldus, Hashemayim v'Za'aretz, says Teldus Molik Siv. Why? Elam al Miluya Nivra. But then the Eila Teldus Peretz, that Peretz through the Geula will come even more. So the bottom line is that the Avedis Adam slowly transformed the world to the point where the Yesh HaNivra can become a total Keli to Elikus, and all the way to the Yesh HaMiti. As the Rebbe says in many of his sikhs, especially in the later years, Yesh HaNivra, Yesh HaMiti. And the point that has to be remembered is this: it's the refinement of the world. It's not the destruction of the world. It's refinement. And as, in the words of Ayin Beis, the transformation of the tzimtzum, that when you transform your nefesh abamis, that's the tzimtzum within you, you're transforming the tzimtzum so that post-tzimtzum reality can experience pre-tzimtzum divine consciousness. So this is only due to very severe Aveda. Remember, every Mesilas Nefesh, how many Jews died al Kiddush Hashem? Millions. So this didn't come easy. Heavy prices were paid to achieve this. This isn't like, oh, nice little game here, that heavy prices were paid. Besides Mesilas Nefesh, all the Aveda, all the struggles, for Frumkeit, for Yiddishkeit, for a mitzvah, etc., etc. So when you take it seriously, it's thousands of years of exertion and very heavy work. So yes, and we believe firmly that work has fruits. The fruits of that work is the Geula. So the Geula will be, Chassidus explains, yes, like the Eir Lifnei Tzimtzum, but even more than that. Remember we mentioned yesterday about the Kav, that the Eir is completely concealed, and then comes the Kav. So he asks a Samach Vav, so what's the achievement? If you just bring him back, the Eir, before the Tzimtzum, what we accomplish? Back to square one. The Eir filled all of existence, like we're speaking, divine consciousness everywhere. Eir Poshet Mamala Kol HaMetzias. You made a Tzimtzum and he concealed it. Then came a Kav, a narrow transmission. The Avedis Adam is to bring back the Eir into existence. Like a student, first you start with Aleph Beis Gimel, because you need to have first the Kalim, like we learned. That you need to have like you brought from the Eitz Chaim, yeah. And then you slowly, the student grows and grows, is able to receive more and more Eir as the Kalim expand, to the point of Eir Lifnei Tzimtzum. Asks in Samach Vav the question, so what did we get? We went down, we came back. You concealed, and then you revealed what was there in the first place. So he gives two answers. It's the whole beginning of Samach Vav, the Rosh Hashanah Maimon, Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah Samach Vav. He gives two answers. First answer, he says, the first chiddush is that now it's within existence. Lifnei Tzimtzum did not leave room for existence. Now you have a student. Now existence is able to be makabel the er lifnei tzimtzum. That's chiddush number one. But that's a chiddush in the makabel, meaning in the chefze. The makabel is now able to receive the mashpia. Before the tzimtzum was only a mashpia. There was no makabel. Second chiddush is even in the oir, he says that through avodah with mamshech teisvus eris, that you can actually bring oir even higher than the oir that was there before the tzimtzum, lifnei tzimtzum, meaning the oir hagoloi, the oir that was concealed. So you're actually reaching levels that were even pre-tzimtzum, so to speak, pre the oir that was there that the tzimtzum impacted. So you bring a oir chodosh, as he calls it. Matan Torah, of course, is a taste of that, like he says in Tanya. But the real full fulfillment of that is la'aseh love, and that's v'nigla k'void Hashem v'ro kol basar yachdov. The pasuk, he brings it also in Tanya Perek Lamed Vav. I would suggest, if you want to fully understand, just go back to chapter 36 in Tanya and refresh yourself what it says there. This is just an explanation in that, and basically there he says, then will be ayin ba'ayin yiro. Right? They're no longer be a garment or a cloth that a veil that conceals the face. Brings there 5-6 psukim, all to demonstrate that the ultimate Aveda is to bring Elikus, not just that Elikus that was there before is now here in existence, but also higher levels of Elikus. This is not so relevant, the higher or not, to this discussion here. Here, the bottom line is, and now comes Rosh Hashanah. So what do we ask for in Rosh Hashanah? That's exactly what we're asking for. Yesh ma'ayin on its own, the ayin is concealed from the yesh. It's there, but it's concealed. But we want, and this is our avodah and our bakosha and our request, we want to see it. So we say, v'yeda kopol, that every product, every creation, that you want to see the producer within the product. V'yovin, and understand it. Like you said, after we call Yitzur, and that's one level. That's knowing and perceiving and understanding. And then there's the level even higher, riyah, to see. So just to slowly elaborate a bit, we know perception and understanding is better than concealment, obviously, because at least you're aware. But riyah is a deeper way of appreciating. Riyah means like you're seeing it with your own eyes. The hisamtus, the resonance and the truth and reality of riyah is not deimed l'shmiyah. Havana v'asog is compared often to listening. So you hear it, you sense it. But now comes the higher level of riyah. So with riyah, he says the following. All of us, there'll be riyah. Today, we ask on Rosh Hashanah for v'yeda. It doesn't say lires, but neshamas of Atzilus can achieve riyah even today. That's essentially what he said in this parentheses. So what is it all about? It's about the Aveda and the transformation. It's not the way it is initially. Till now, everything we've been discussing has been how the way God created it. Yesh, ayin, yesh. Now, this parentheses, which of course is the whole point, is to come to the kavanah of it all is that. So just to sum up the parentheses, I just said it like that. I'm just looking inside if I missed anything. Yeah.
The Shamas Datzilus will probably have a higher Re'iyah than.
Absolutely. There's always going to be levels higher and higher. Yes, correct. And Mach Nachmer, it's not a static situation. This constant journey. We also, not just the Shamas Datzilus, everyone is going to continue to grow. That doesn't stop anywhere. It's now, however, growth from good to better. Instead of growth from concealment to revelation, it'll be from revelation to higher revelation. She says, that's exactly right. That after it creates, you get a deeper understanding. That's like the kav, the idea of the shamas. Yeah. Now it's interesting. He brought the Shari Yichud V'Amuna that says, "Ilu she'im nitne reshus la'ayin hayaroyin." that he says that about neshamas begufim in general, that they have that capacity. But then he qualifies that neshamas atzilus, they have such a riyah, the way they are gufim lamata. But by us, he says, it will be la'asid this way. The niglu kvedavai ro kol basu yachtav. Okay, that's the summation of the parentheses. I want to just add one more thing, which I've already stated a few times, but it's good to spell it out. So what will happen with the whole seder shtalshlus la'asid love? You could say, as long as you needed the stepping stones for creation and for avodah, right? We needed the stepping stones to go back and forth, back and forth. That God creates in a progressive, logical system. That's why you have yesh, ayin, yesh, and all the levels in between, atzilus, bria, tzira, see the whole thing. And we needed to walk back, to retrace the steps to reconnect, as we discussed many times. What happens once there's the reconnection? So you could think we don't need to say the shtalshlus anymore, but that's not correct. Because remember, it's always dira b'tachtenim. Say the shtalshlus was not just a temporary reprieve, a temporary process. Say the shtalshlus is also created by God. It's also godliness. However, its role is to create the interface. So the interface won't disappear. It'll all be permeated. It'll basically be the shtalshlus will continue to be necessary because it creates the structure of existence. There'll still be daimon tzameach chai medaber. It doesn't say a mineral, a stone will become a bird, and an animal will become a human. There will be the structure. The structure will be permeated with the divine. So you'll have basically diversity. If you remember, we learned about his chalkus. He said, dafka from the koyach ha'atzmus comes the koyach of, when we learned about the question of how does from unity come a multitude, diversity. So there's a part of this answer, but the ultimate answer is koyach ha'atzmus, b'yicholte, just as he has the power to create bli gvul, he has the power to create gvul, just as unity has the power to create multiplicity. So it'll all be permeated with the divine. So there'll be oyer, there'll be yesh. What you won't have is an utter concealment and a darkness like we have now. That will be the main change. In other words, the concealment that we can deceive ourselves into thinking there's nothing but us, aniv avsi'et. And there can be pain and injustice and hurt and war and so on.
Which means the animals are not going to feel atzmos, but they're not going to have evil.
It says clearly, mashbisin shalei yaziku. It'll be his basic chayiram in aretz. The whole thing about it.
The whole kol basar is only a human being.
The whole what?
The whole kol basar is only a human being.
You're saying or you're asking?
I'm asking, not animals.
First of all, what are you asking? Whether animals will perceive atzmus or they'll perceive eidei sof lifnei atzimtzum? Which level you're talking about?
Yeah.
They'll perceive what they have to, whatever they have to perceive. I don't know, whatever God wants them to perceive. I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I don't know what they perceive now even. I mean, they clearly fulfill God's desire. They have no bchira. So it's not it's their role, whatever. But I'm not, it's not a competition. And what about, let me ask you a question. What will be the difference between tzaddikim and rabbeim, how they perceive Elokus, and you and I? Can you tell me the difference?
You said there are levels in it. I don't know.
There are levels, exactly. With animals, there's also levels. So it's a different level, obviously. The Yeda Kol Pol, but Pashtus Kol Pol means every part of the creation, not just humans. So it looks, the levels we're not discussing now. We know there's going to be levels. The point is, you're asking the difference between neshamas and animals? Of course there's a big difference. Even malachim don't perceive what neshamas perceive. But you need explanation. It's not for this discussion now to discuss the different levels. But point is, there will be levels. Even among people, I mentioned the pasuk many times. The lo yilamdu ish esrei eyu, One person will not teach another. Ki kulam yedu eisi. Everyone will know oisi atzmus. Limiktanim v'ad from young to old. So you have right there atzmus oisi, but also miktanim v'ad. So it's both. Bottom line is there's going to be structure and there'll be etzem. It's not a contradiction as we learned. And Elikus is going to be permeating everything. So getting back to our discussion here. Okay, good. I think we covered it. Oh, I'll tell you what I was speaking about Seder Shtalshel. So fine. One more point I want to make. There's a famous machlekes between the Rambam and the Ramban. What will be the ultimate tachlis aschar? The ultimate reward. Will it be souls without bodies? The Rambam holds that. Or will it be souls within bodies? Now everybody holds there'll be tchis hamesim. That's not a question. There's the clear sources, the Rambam too. So that means there'll be neshamas begufim. But according to the Rambam, that will be only a stage. There'll be the return of the gufim, the souls, there'll be resurrection, but it'll be enough to reward the bodies for the time that they did Aveda in this world. And then it'll be just neshamas nenim miziv ashkina. Why? Because a body is a limited yesh. It can't perceive godliness like a neshama can. That's the Rambam, Maimonides' opinion. Comes the Ramban, Nachmanides, and Shara Gomel, and he says, no, the opposite is true. Right now, neshamas go to Gan Eden without bodies. The bodies die. And then it'll be permanent. Neshamas in Gufim. The Tzemach Tzedek says that in all the drushim of the Alter Rebbe, he goes with the shita of the Ramban. Basically, in the words of different chassidus, the Rebbe, that the Mukabalim went with the Ramban, not with the Rambam. Now, the Rambam has a logical argument. A soul seems to be much more spiritual than a body. But what is the chiddush of the Ramban according to chassidus? Is because the Yesh HaNivra has a connection to Atzmus, and the Neshamis a connection to Oyer. So the Gufim have something, because the Rambam is based on a structure where Ruchnis is higher than Gashmis. Soul is higher than body. So in some aspects that's true. But from the point of view of Atzmus is not closer to Ruchnis than he is to Gashmis. So since when is this material world not capable of having full perception? So that's why the maskana is that it will be in the Yesh HaGashmi, in the Tachtenim, Dira B'Tachtenim, which of course the Rambam doesn't address Dira B'Tachtenim. Though the Rambam understood that the neshama comes down below to refine this world, but in his way of looking at it, it's in order to go back to Aruchnisdika place, not the permanent Dira B'Tachtenim. Now it's not that the Rambam was wrong. The Rambam is talking a particular perspective. He's talking from the Bechina of Oyer, of Ishtalshalos. Atzilus is higher than Asiyah. That's why the Rambam, we talked I mentioned this, Hu Hamada Hu Yidei. He's talking everything within the structures of existence. Chassidus talks about, and the Maral, about what's beyond existence. But I don't want to go into Rambam. I just wanted to make that final point about just it amplifies the whole theme here of transformation of the Yesh to recognize the Ayin. Okay, good. So let's move to after the parentheses. You could see that the Rebbe Rashab, at the end of this Maimon, coming to the end, is beginning to introduce Rosh Hashanah themes. But it's interwoven completely into the central theme here of Yesh and Ayin. So, and this is because the Rosh Hashanah Maimon, as I said 105 years ago. Chedesh Hashvi here. Okay, so he continues now and says,
it's going to be 106 this Rosh Hashanah.
From Ayin Vov?
Oh, Ayin Vov, not Ayin Hey.
Right. Yeah, it's Ayin Vov. Yeah. So he says like this now. As I mentioned, it's quite a star because this was the year right after Tishrei that Rebbe Rashab would move from Lubavitch to Rostov, and and now we're in the 80th year from when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, and then dedicated 770. So Lubavitch was beginning to shift as we were this mimer was being taught. That year, Lubavitch would move, meaning the center of Lubavitch, to, the Rebbe says, Eser Golius, the 10 different journeys and exiles till it would come to America. Yeah. In Lubavitch, they spent 103 years. So far, we're 80 years here in 770 in New York. Okay. So now after the parentheses, the line begins, V'ro kol basar. So he says, V'zehu. V'zehu, and this is the meaning of the binyan HaMalchus, the structuring, the building of Malchus, Huma HaGvuris, Dafke. That to rebuild the building of Malchus, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, comes from Gvuris.
Simon, you didn't finish to explain about the Ishtalshelus.
I did.
Why do we need the Ishtalshelus then?
I gave a whole explanation. I told you, Dire B'Tachtenim. The structure remains. We're not annihilating existence, and it's all part of Elikus. The Elikus, Koyach Atzmus, to create the multitude. I just explained it.
Okay, but there's no need for it. Then I'm not talking.
I mean, who decides there's a need? God says there's a need. There's a need. Dire B'Tachtenim. He wants Tachtenim. He wants a structured existence. He wants the world as we know it to be the Dire. If it loses the element of this world, then it's not a Dire B'Tachtenim. Then you might as well go to Atzilus in the first place.
So this world, of course, but Atzilus and Ak and all of these things.
I just explained. Listen. I explained it. You could tell me you missed it, but I just explained it for a while. I explained it. Yeah, these worlds are all meant to create Tachtenim, a structured existence. You tell me there's no need for structure. The Eibusha says there is a need. Dire b'Tachtenim. He wants a dire in Tachtenim. As I mentioned, it's not a temporary interface. It's part of the whole process. Gilui, that there should be the Giluyim in the Gilui ha'etzem in the Yesh. So Giluyim is a whole Seder Shtalshlus. Structure is Seder Shtalshlus. And it joins together. It's not just Atzmus, it's Atzmus as he manifests. Dira lo yizbarach la'atzmusei b'tachtenim. So this world remains a world. It's just now the concealment and the golus and all the pain is gone. But there's no destruction of this universe.
But we won't need the in-between steps to make a relationship or to understand anything.
That's incorrect. I just mentioned lemiktanum v'agdelam. Each one of us has our own particular unique dynamic. So we do need it. We need both.
Bria will have the function
through the structure. There'll be Katan and Godel, there'll be Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, Mashiach. There'll be all kinds of levels. The only thing we'll be missing is Helam, and Golas. But structure will exist and we will grow. How do you grow? Say the Shtaus is the way you grow.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure about that, but because we say that
not only not sure, it's absolutely that's the case. That means dire b'tachtenim. That's the kavanah.
We say that when the neshamas come out of Gan Eden, they won't be going for mechayel or choyel anymore, but they will have a direct relation to Shechina, and so there'll be menucha hayeromim. There is mamish a change when things happen like that.
And the change will not eliminate the structure of existence or the structure and the hierarchy of human beings and so on.
Okay. I mean, that's
I
before.
just read your pasuk. Kulam yedu esi limiktanom va'ad gdelam. That's not my words. It's a pasuk in Nach. I think in, I don't know if it's Yeshaya or wherever.
Yeshaya.
Huh?
Yeshaya, I think.
Anyway, this is not really for the scope of this discussion here. You can go look it up and study it and so on. But remember, dire b'tachtenim. That nasav is the goal, is the ultimate goal. If the whole structure disappears, what was the purpose in the first place?
We still have the Tachtonim. We're still the bottom.
Tachtenim means there's Elyonim. There's no such thing as Tachtenim without Elyonim.
He's
That's the
Elyon.
definition of Tachten. Look in Tanya, and you'll see what he says. Anyway, the structure of existence will be permeated with Giluyim all the way to the Etzem. The Etzem will be Begoli through the Oyer. All that will not disappear. All of that's going to be there. Even Tzimtzum will remain. It says that Tzimtzum Atz me Yoyer. However, the Tzimtzum won't be a force of concealment. It'll be a force of revelation. Anyway, there's not opinions on this matter. This is the Seder of Chassidus. That's why I brought the Ramban, not just the Rambam. Okay. V'zehu the binyan hamalchus ma'gvuras dafka. That the structure of malchus is from Guras. Now, remember, he's entered into, even though it was a parentheses, he's talking about Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah is binyan hamalchus. What does binyan hamalchus mean? So let's see how much he's going to say here. So if we go back in this volume, I'll just refer you. He spoke a whole arichas about binyan hamalchus. So it looks like I don't know if he's referring to it directly, but it's clearly there. Let me just point out where it is. Yeah, bottom of page 688. So you'll see there's a lot of similarities there to what we're learning now here. And essentially, we're talking there, he talked about, if you remember, remember the two interpretations? So koyach, Elikai HaMelech is connected to koyach, to malchus, melech. So I'll just read one line from there. He says, you need You need many tzimtzumim to get to melech. The levadzes, besides the fact shetzarich is mir v'tzimtzum b'yeridas seishtalsus achi is galus harotzen l'savas elemis. Besides the fact that you need a diminishment and a concealment in the descent of ishtalshlus, of the cosmic order, in order for the revelation of there should be the desire, the revealed desire for creation. So he says, "Shazel b'chinas ha'ayin hamoker liyesh." The hainu b'chinas hamalchus k'moishi ba'atzilus. The ayin as the moker for the yesh. The gdei sheyeh b'chinas ayin liyesh. The hainu b'chinas rotzen le'avis tzarich l'shtalshus desesvidus. Okay. So in addition to that, he says, "In the gdei sheyeh b'chinas alikai mel b'chinas keich hapoyel benifel tzarich l'zeh kamet tzimtzumim." Because for the godly energy to enter into a particular pole, called Paul, to a particular creation, you need concealments. You need tzimtzumim. Because the Eir Eliki on its own is an Eir Pashat. It's a shapeless, undefined energy. So if you wanted to become a Koyach HaPel Benifel, that it should relate to the thing it's creating, you need tzimtzumim. Kved malchuscha, that's malchus. V'gvurascha yidaberu. Why gvurascha? Uksiv le'idiyah lebnei adam gvuresov. V'kved adam l'chosei. B'chdei sheyeh melucha lias mokel l'metzias elam etzorich lias ha'idei gvuras v'tzimtzumim. In order for there to be melucha, in other words, a melucha that relates to existence, you need gvura and tzimtzum. So gvura associated with concealments. And there he says, in Kiyadua, the binyan hamalchus, hu mahagvuras dafke. That binyan hamalchus, because malchus is already how God relates, Elikai melech, how he relates to existence. He's a melech on existence. That requires concealments. So I just wanted to put it in context. Then he goes on to explain 3 levels of gvuras, which I don't know if is relevant to our discussion. But let me go back now to here. So he says like this, V'zeu the binyan hamalchus. So what happens on Rosh Hashanah? So the Gemara says, Hubameh, after he says, Imru lefane malchis, zechrenis, malchis keteshat tamlichuni alechem, and zechrenis kadesh shetehei zechrenim lefanai, and shefris, what does it say? Shefris, what's the lashon there? Shefris. It says Ubameh, Ubameh, and how do we achieve this? The Shefer. We achieve this through Shefer. So Rosh Hashanah is about building, rebuilding, and re-crowning God as king. That's why we use all the psukim and all the tefillas. It's about asking God to be our king, renewing the contract of king. What means king? That he has a relationship with us. So every year, Rosh Hashanah, that's renewed. Before Rosh Hashanah, that goes back into a state of, like a comatose state, chezrim adavarim lekadmusam, like Chassidus brings, the Siddur from the Mittler Rebbe. Everything goes back to its original state. And when we blow Shefer, or the general, the tefillos of Rosh Hashanah, like he says in the Geras HaKedesh, Simin Yudalid, that when Rosh Hashanah enters, the prayers and then Shefer re-crown God as king. So therefore, it's a sense of bringing back all that we've been learning. There should be the Ratzon for Ano Emlech, the Ratzon for Elamus, and all the details, and all the way through, whole Seder Ishtalshlus is renewed. So this is called Binyan HaMalchus, the building of the kingdom, of the empire. Which empire? Godly empire. That's what Rosh Hashanah. So you're building Malchus. So he says, this is now, well, based on what we learned, we'll understand why it's Tafke Megvuris. Oh, maybe that's what I just read. Is it? What did I say? What page? Yeah. Hey, that's interesting. I didn't even realize that. Yeah, B'yem Hashmini it says. Rebbe Rashab himself tells us to go back to the Maimon I just read from. Oh, Baruch Shekivanti. Fine. So Ayim Hashmini is barely ill. The Maimon of B'yem Hashmini it says, that's page Tofresh Peiches 688. So I'm glad we just read that. Fine. Good. So that's what he says there. Good. Yeah, here he brings the pasuk. They will say, Yemeru, they will say, the glory of Malchuscha, of your kingship or kingdom. And they will speak about your strengths, your powers. So what does that mean? It's just compliment, they'll just talk about praising God? No. Those are the 5 severities or the 5 strengths of Zoy Rampin. Let's samtzim. What's their role? Their role, remember, there's Moichin, Chachma Bina Das, then there's the Midas Zoh. So the Zoh has 5 Gvuras, 5 powers, 5 strengths, 5, like he says. Their role is Litzamtzim, Ulahailim Ha'oir, to conceal, or Litzamtzim, to contract, and Lahailim, to conceal the Oir, the intense Oir that's there before, Liyaz Binyan HaMalchus, that they should be able to create and build Malchus. B'bchinas Tzimtzum U'miyat Ha'oir. B'chdei she'yuchaliyas Mokaliyesh. So the Hei Gvuras are like 5 filters or 5 channels that limit and constrict and conceal the light, that it should be able to go into Bina Malchus, that the Ayin should be relative to the Yesh. So in a sense, if you think of it this way, before Rosh Hashanah, everything goes back to its original state, Beruchnius, which is what? Is removed from existence. Remember, Eid Ein Sof, all the way in the highest levels, you don't even have a Ratzon yet. There's no desire. Then you need what we said, a Heskim, a consideration, and then a Shakavataya and all that. So in order to bring it down, you need so-called a will, and God should want to connect to existence, all the way down to be a ayin that's a mokar liyesh. So since you could say that before Rosh Hashanah, the ayin goes back to its source, the ayin of the Yesh Amiti, And we want, however, binyan hamalchus. So we want the ayin to come back down, so to speak, into the ayin of the yesh hanivra. That's binyan hamalchus, and that requires tzimtzum. Gvuras. So again, these are the 5 gvuras. Letzamtzum lahaylam ha'ir. They diminish and conceal the energy in order to be this building of malchus, which is in a state of tzimtzum and miyut, concealment and diminishment of the light. So in other words, if you want a creation, you can't just say Oyer Ein Sof. You want to say Yehi Oyer, Yehi Rakia, Teitze Eretz Desha. That is essentially channeling God's energy into a particular form, Oyer, Rakia, and basically all of creation. In order for that binyan hamalchus to happen, and the ayin should be commensurate and relatively relatable to the yesh, that requires the gvuras that he's talking about.
What's hey for us? What is the hey?
Hey gvuras. What are the 5 gvuras?
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, if you look back in Tafresh Peiches, I think he says what they are.
Mm-hmm. In Zod, there is also hey chasodim, right?
Yeah. The hey gvuras is actually why we take 5 heshainis on Heshana Rabbah. Lahamtika gvuras. 1 second. If I recall correctly, I don't want to just talk from memory right now. I think the 5 is bina. So I'm not sure. I would have to go back there. I think he talks about it there.
I thought that it just depends. Sometimes they're Hegavor, sometimes they're Hechasodim.
It's not sometimes, it's 2 different levels.
I thought it was different side of the coin.
Chesed and Gvura are 2 different forces.
Understood.
So when we talk about binyan hamalchus, you need Gvura, not Chesed.
Yeah, but the same meters of Zov, they have different.
They have Chesed and they have Gvura, like every midah. Every sphere has Chesed and Gvura.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So I have to look up what the 5 are. I'm not sure. Could be the 5 parsufim. Okay, let me look it up. I'll tell you when I find out. Okay. Remember, he's going back to before the parentheses, before the gilui of the yesh, of the ayin in the yesh. We're talking now, if you remember, before the parentheses, it was all about that the yesh is dafka through the hester. So you have to read these lines, go back to the words before the parentheses. Very important. That we're talking now the concealment of the ayin within the yesh. So this is the binyan hamalchus is through concealment. So the ayin is now, can relate to the yesh. The zehu, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. And just like we have in Zah, the concealments in order to build malchus, to be the ayin, should relate to the yesh, to be a mokir, at least to the yesh, still concealed, but it's a mokir. Same thing, or similarly, is also in malchus itself. So in addition to the helm of the 5 gvurus of Zah, as it enters into malchus, to create malchus, you need concealment. He says in malchus itself, there's another concealment. The malchus conceals the light on or into the creation, the creature. Shouldn't be revealed and shouldn't be comprehended by or understood by the nivra. In other words, it should remain beyond us. The day was shining, it couldn't be a yesh umitzias. Basically a dover nifred. Okay. So now he's going to go back to the whole beginning of the theme of ayin. We're talking now, what does ayin mean in context of the creation? That it means beyond us, not comprehensible, the second interpretation. says, "V'zeu mashama ayin shalayesh nivra." I'm sorry. "V'zeu masha ayin shalayesh nivra nikra ayin." Ein zeshu b'chinas ayin be'etzem. And this is when we say that the ayin of the yesh nivra, this level of ayin of the created yesh, why we call it ayin, it doesn't mean ayin be'etzem, that it's fundamentally non-existent. Like we said about the level of ayin amiti from yesh amiti. Or b'chlal, that it's beyond existence altogether. Rak shal shem she'ena musig b'nivroim nikra ayin. The only reason it's called ayin is because it's not understood and comprehended and conscious by the yesh in the nivroim, that is. Okay, let's stop here because we're now going to go a little more into Malchus and Ayin. We'll stop here, 3/4 down, 11:52.
10:30 tomorrow, so everybody knows.
10:30 tomorrow, yes.